Hey everyone, welcome to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And today, for episode 186 of the podcast, we have an awesome show. We're going to be talking about the news from ARM's TechCon conference this week. We are also giving you an update on Facebook's device, and guess what? It's not as private as you thought it was. Plus, we've got a secure device framework from the UK that looks awesome. We're going to talk a little bit about GitHub Actions and what that might mean for the IoT. We've got new products from SimpliSafe. We've got discontinued products from Mayo. And the industrial IoT gets a new place to go to find out good information about what things work together. Plus, Kevin is going to talk about 2 new toys that he has. And then we're going to hear from the CEO of Espresso, which makes an IoT chip that has been surprisingly successful. All of this and a message from our sponsor Cognizant awaits you this show. So let's get it started with a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Auklet. With 64% of IoT consumers reporting performance issues, you need an edge-first application performance monitoring solution. Choose Auklet, the problem-solving software that watches your application, system, and their environments for issues. From device anomalies to fleet-wide errors, Auklet will provide you with the intel you need to solve problems before your customers find them. Sign up today at auklet.io. That's AUKLET.io. Oh my goodness, Kevin, I am not at ARM TechCon. Last year I was there. It's a good conference. I just was tired of traveling. But 2 big announcements coming out of there. One, ARM is bringing Intel, Arduino, My Devices, and everything into their IoT device management platform. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, and actually to talk about this, we should probably backtrack maybe 2 months because ARM purchased a data management services layer company called Treasure Data back then. What they've done this week is announce that Treasure Data for the data management services, their device management services with ARM Embed, which is their IoT platform, and connectivity management services are all bundled into the Pelion IoT platform for ARM. So that gets us to today or this week, and now ARM is saying, hey, we've got some new partners with our Pelion platform, and those partners are Intel as well as My Devices. So what's happening here is ARM is now bringing in more silicon partners. I don't know that it's a big deal for the Intel bit, but it is on the side of smaller chips, and in particular, Arduino, which is the little programmable boards that are inexpensive, great for prototyping devices. Arduino is actually partnering also with Pelion connectivity management system, so that way they can scale out pretty quickly with devices and so on. So this is kind of a big deal for people who are makers, companies that want to get into the IoT space, the hardware space. I was surprised that ARM's Embed OS, which is their operating system for microcontrollers, has 350,000 developers, according to ARM. That seems like a large number.
Too. Yeah, I mean, for the embedded operating systems, so these are RTOSs, real-time operating systems, so, you can't run full-scale Linux. So there are lots of options. FreeRTOS is one of the biggest and most widely used ones, and Amazon actually brought in the developer of FreeRTOS into their company. But, Embed was kind of lagging, so it must have really hopped up in the last year or so.
Yeah, by comparison, like when I look at phone makers and other device makers that have their own little development platforms, that just seems like a relatively large number. I mean, typically I'm seeing, we have 10,000 developers using this SDK or whatever. That just seems huge.
Well, and maybe, what does use mean? Perhaps people have downloaded this just to check it out because, there's tons of people using ARM stuff out there. But I don't know. We'll give it to them because we don't know any better. So if you guys are using ARM Embed, or if you think you're one of the 350,000 who downloaded it to see what it is and then never touched it again, let us know. Okay. Also in ARM news is they launched their Neoverse line, which sounds really cool. Basically,
sounds like the Matrix.
It does. I'm like, Neo! This is their infrastructure, branding, and a roadmap associated with it. So Neoverse is kind of like ARM's Cortex brand. Cortex is their smartphone, high-end kind of very powerful processors. Neoverse is high-end, very powerful processors, but it's going to be designed for infrastructure. For Neoverse, they're going to start pushing this into servers, routers, gateways, even base stations. They have their Cortex chips in some of these places now, but this new line is going to be focused there. And the big focus that they're talking about are today's big buzzwords: IoT, edge computing, and 5G. So what ARM has taken to doing, and I'm not sure I love this, but it's in line with other chip manufacturers, is they are pre-releasing what their future cores are going to look like. It used to be that ARM would only announce a core when it was ready to go or about ready to go. Now they're basically giving a hint on their roadmap ahead. And this is a really impressive roadmap it's going to have a lot of the same CPUs that power the Cortex chips. The Cosmos platform is the one that's going to it's out today, but they've got an Ares platform for next year, the Zeus platform for 2020, and the Poseidon platform for 2021. And both Ares and Zeus are going to be 7 nanometers, and Poseidon is going to be at 5 nanometers. That is the latest manufacturing process for semiconductors. When we're talking about nanometers, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about cramming more transistors on a chip, makes them faster, better, and more power efficient. So yay! And they'll have a bunch of different ways of putting together different modules on these chips to fit the needs of whatever device they're going to be in. So the thing to know and take away from this is ARM is basically using this Neoverse line as a way to compete with Intel going forward in some of the areas where Intel is huge and trying to get bigger. Now, unlike Intel, ARM just licenses its cores. So it licenses its cores to companies like Qualcomm and Broadcom and others. So you're not going to see ARM making chips. You're just going to see it partnering with companies to produce these higher end, more powerful semiconductors.
Right. ARM just designs the chip architecture and then licenses it out.
And, there's an idea here, and you hear this from Intel a lot, which is this end-to-end edge-to-cloud kind of thing. So there are possibly advantages. I mean, there are advantages, but you could get around it, of having the same chip in your server that talks to your edge devices. Both of them could be running the same kind of software that allows for more communication or security between the two. So ARM is going to be touting that just as much as Intel, although the news about the Pelion platform, if you're working within ARM's device management system, it's going to be heterogeneous. So that means it could actually have, if you're working through that layer, it would actually be tied to Intel or ARM chips. So, wah! That wah noise is just like exciting for very few nerdy people. So that's the big ARM news. It is a big deal. We'll see. Again, this is kind of far out, so we'll see how this works out. Now, let's move it out of the cloud and the crazy on-device silicon layer where you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Let's move to something we all care about, privacy and Facebook.
Yeah, let's move out of the cloud and into the home, shall we? Because last week, and I know we mentioned this on the show, and neither one of us were too enthused by this. I'm sure a lot of people actually aren't. Facebook announced Portal, which is its in-home video conferencing speaker, smart speaker. It is integrated with Madam A. They, being Facebook, had said, totally privacy conscious, no problem. No data will be collected through Portal, not even call log data or app usage data, etc. Now they're kind of walking that back a little bit. And they're saying that because Portal's built on Facebook's Messenger infrastructure, they will be collecting the same types of information that they collect from Messenger, such as the length of a call, frequency of a call, possibly how much you use other apps. And that feeds into the information that they will use to serve ads in Facebook to you. So you won't see ads on the Portal device, which makes sense, but you are giving up some of your data to Facebook, continuing to give it up, I should say. And that is not what they said when they announced this product.
Yeah, at best, this is an example of Facebook not realizing what it does. At worst, what this is someone at Facebook realizing that, oh, hey, we have been caught before on this exact same thing. So let's preempt that story in a couple weeks where someone monitors our Portal thing and says, oh, look, it is sharing data with Facebook. Mm-hmm. And then we have like Kashmir Hill sending us all these, writing the story and sending all this hate our way. So really, yay for not being complete horrible people.
Yeah, the whole thing was confusingly launched, quite honestly. And part of it, I'm loath to do this, but I'll give Facebook the benefit of the doubt a little bit here and say, maybe they were interpreting the question about data privacy and ads on Portal as, are you going to show ads on Portal based on the data that it collects?
Yep.
And the answer would be no.
But that's not the fear everyone has about Facebook.
I
the fear
know.
is, Facebook's collecting all this data. Like the most common, believe it or not, I get this question a lot when I go speak to people. They're like, hey, so what about Facebook listening on my phone to my conversations? Because I always see ads after I've talked about it. And Facebook has actually addressed that very worry and says they do not listen in on your conversations. But Portal, in this case, that's actually kind of what they would be doing, is pulling in that data to show you ads on Facebook. Okay. So exciting.
So you're still not buying one, I assume?
I'm still not buying one of these. I can't see anyone buying one of these. I wonder if this will, fail faster than Google's Nexus Q. That I look at that black spherical thing that they launched to do TV streaming.
It could be. I mean, I'd be curious to see how many they sell, or if they continue to sell them 6 months beyond the launch date.
Shudder. All right. Speaking of security, though, we have good news on this front. Good news, especially if you were in the UK, because the UK government actually finalized this last weekend, they finalized their rules for consumer IoT devices. So they launched this code of practice. They started talking about it in March, and they finally had their comments and everything done and basically finalized it this last weekend. And it is really strong, guys. I'm going to include a link. Go check this out because it is really long, as you might imagine. But the big guidelines are the same sort of things that we have talked about. No default passwords, implement a vulnerability disclosure policy. So if you have a device, you need to have a person that people can check in with and a website that people can check in with to say, hey, is this device affected by this vulnerability? Keep your software updated, securely store your credentials, and securely store sensitive data, which surprisingly does not always happen. Believe it or not. Communicate securely. Whoa. And they actually, in this, they ask for open peer-reviewed internet standards, which I think, good. Minimize exposed surface attacks. So operate on the principle of least privilege. So don't leave ports open. Try not to have hardware that exposes you to access. So like no
root access for everyone.
Yes. So it is good here. Ensure software integrity. So please verify your software using secure boot mechanisms. If devices have unauthorized changes, let the consumer know. Say, hey, your device is whack. Ensure your personal data is protected. Make systems resilient to outages. I really like this. Take into account the possibility of outages of data, networks, and power. So as much as you can, have these devices remain operational and functional. Obviously, your lights aren't going to work when the power's out, but your door lock should work, even with a key, or maybe if it's battery powered with a keypad access if the internet is out. Monitor system telemetry data. This is something the best companies do right now. So if you're gathering data from devices, you should be looking for anomalies. Like right now, as a consumer, I can buy security add-ons to my mesh router system that will actually look for this stuff. Like, oh, hey, Stacy, all of a sudden your TV is downloading a lot of stuff and it's calling Korea. And I'll be like, weird.
And I think a lot of the devices that are available today actually are capable of capturing the telemetry data, but the missing piece, which is what comes into play here, is actually monitoring it.
Yeah. And there are actually some companies that do this, and I'm not allowed to say which ones, but they're big name brands. So yay. Make it easy for consumers to delete personal data. I am so for this, you guys. I cannot tell you how many times I go to uninstall a device and I'm like, hey, I can't actually delete anything. I'm just going to, a lot of times they don't even have a deregister the device button. So think ahead, y'all. Make installation and maintenance of devices easy. Please, please. Invalidate input data. So this is a little esoteric, but just look for data that's wacky. And if you see it, don't necessarily react to it. So one of the examples they give is out of range data. So a temperature value that is beyond the limits of a sensor. So if it says it's 150 degrees Fahrenheit inside someone's house, that's probably out of range. That's not something that should be there. So you're going to validate that and make sure that it's accurate before you actually take action on it.
And these are just guidelines, just to be clear. The UK government does plan to review how to actually implement these through legislation as well, but they're smartly taking their time to evaluate how to do that. So at some point in the future, some, maybe all of these things will be enforceable, but at the moment, they're just guidelines. There have been 2 companies, they say, HP and Hive, that have signed on and committed to following this code. So that's promising. Much better than what we have here in the US, which I know last week we talked about the new law in California, and we said at that time, that's just a bare minimum first step. This goes well beyond, and you're right, this is what we've been talking about for months, if not years, what we need to see.
We didn't see an expiration date for devices, which I still strongly want, but I still think this is a really excellent policy. So go UK. And for consumers, because that's mostly aimed at device manufacturers and platform players, but for consumers, they have a shorter consumer guidelines. I'll also link to that, but they're pretty much the things Kevin and I already tell you to do. So, hey, don't use the default password. Make sure it's a strong password when you put your password in. If it has 2-factor, you should do that. Make sure you update your software and apps just to keep it secure. And they even have this section that I appreciate because this is honestly really confusing for consumers. But if you become aware of an incident and think it affects your device, they tell you what to do. Unfortunately, they really only tell you to visit the manufacturer's website to see if they have information. And then they also have a National Cybersecurity Center that might also offer guidance. So that, a lot of times, like I was talking to somebody about hacked televisions and they're like, well, what if my TV is hacked and there are no software updates? I was like, yeah, then you need to disconnect it from the internet. Mm-hmm. That's all you get to do here, people. And they're like, I don't want to do that. I'm like, yeah, I feel you. All right. So that is really exciting. Check out those links. It's really exciting for us. You may not think it's that exciting, but it really is because security really affects all of us.
I may move to the UK now.
Okay, it's cold and rainy. Have fun. All right, GitHub Actions.
That's not something we talk about that often, GitHub.
No, we don't. And the reason we are is because we think that this announcement is a big freaking deal and is probably something that people who are building IoT devices and services would take advantage of.
Right. And to be clear, this is something that any developer using GitHub could take advantage of, but there is definitely a subsector of IoT developers that would benefit from this. And what we're talking about is the new GitHub Actions and GitHub Connect. And what GitHub is doing is making it a lot easier to basically pull in code and packages into your programming and allow you to use or create workflows or actions. So neither one of us is a heavy-duty programmer, and I've only touched the surface of GitHub, so I don't want to get too in-depth here, just basically because I don't have a good feel for how this is going to work. But it seems to me like if you wanted to, for example, build your own if this then that in the cloud using GitHub Actions, you theoretically could. It's a way for you to just pull in other bits of code and create workflows that will run as a program or a service.
And this is big for IoT because a lot of our current devices have cloud-to-cloud connections. So we'll take the consumer side because it's just easier to illustrate. My Hue light bulbs communicate via cloud-to-cloud interface with my Nest thermostat. So if my Nest thermostat senses I'm not home, it can tell my Hue light bulbs to do something. That's really cool, but it's also something those guys do, right? I have no influence on this. The idea here is that using GitHub Actions, you could actually create that flow and let people download that on their own. Eventually, they're talking about possibly having a marketplace for these. And again, in the world that we're entering, we're going to have our devices do a lot of the mediation for us. And those devices are doing that mediation via APIs. And this is a way to corral that, control that, and make it accessible to everyone in a way that it isn't today. So that's why we think it's really exciting. And we'll see. There's a lot of future stuff here, but I think it's going to be cool. Yay! All right. Now let's go back to the home and talk about doorbells. Woo! Doorbells. SimpliSafe has a new video doorbell. It looks kind of like the Nest Hello.
It looks just like the Nest Hello. Not kinda.
Yeah, okay. It looks a lot like it. It looks a little fatter, but yes, it's got a super wide 162 diagonal field of view. What is a diagonal field of view?
I don't think diagonal is the right word, but that's okay.
That's just what the press release says. But it can see wider than the normal. It's usually 130 degrees is usually what we're looking at. So, I mean, it's a doorbell, you guys.
It is. It's cheaper than the Nest Hello, though, I will say that. It's $169. And I don't think Nest has a infrared sensor.
Oh.
Yeah, see, this has a dual sensor, a PIR sensor, and also the camera, obviously. So the idea there is it'll be more effective to figure out a person from just some other moving object that's maybe in its field of vision. Like the Nest Hello doorbell, this has infrared sensors to help distinguish, people from things you don't care about that are moving, maybe leaves blowing or a car passing by. So that's good. It's also cheaper than the Nest Hello at $169. It does not, however, work currently with Google Assistant. It does, however, work with Madam A. So if you're in the Madam A universe and you're looking for doorbell, video doorbell, that is, this might be a good option.
Yes. And I fully expect, I got a question this week about this. I fully expect that Nest and Google are going to make the doorbell and camera integrations part of the reason to be in their home system. So if you have a Google digital assistant, the Nest doorbell is going to be great for you. If you have an Amazon Echo digital assistant ecosystem, you're probably going to want to stick with Ring or check out this. And speaking of the Hello and Google integration, Kevin, you've had some experience with this recently. I
did. I received a loaner unit of the Pixel 3 XL phone last week at the Google event. And I also got the Pixel stand, which is rather expensive at $80. It's a wireless charger for the phone. It will charge any phone wirelessly. But if you have a Pixel 3 or Pixel 3 XL, it has some additional functionality in that as you leave the phone on the charger, it will kind of create like a mini Google Home experience, a visual one, kind of like the smart displays. So it will display photo frames or photo albums and other things. But also it has a Nest integration that so far has been the best I've ever seen. So when somebody rings the doorbell, a Nest doorbell, normally today I would tell my TV or my smart TV to, hey, show me who's at the front door. And it would churn and churn. About 6 seconds later, I'd see that person standing there. And then I could communicate with them. This just pops up the video automatically on your phone when it's on the Pixel stand, and it only takes about a second. I am super impressed. I don't know how they're doing that. Maybe some service is running in the background. I do not know, but very impressive.
Nice. I am still waiting for that feature set to get into my Google Smart Display, because it is eventually going to be automatic in there too, right?
It should be.
Okay. Outside of the doorbell world, let's go back to the industrial IoT. Grab your valves, grab your pipes. We're going to be talking about the Industrial IoT Consortium. There was a big event in Barcelona this week that I also did not go to because, again, too much travel. But as part of this, the Industrial IoT Consortium announced a website that you can now go to basically find out how to structure big IoT projects. So this is the IIC Resource Hub. I'll include a link to it. But the most interesting thing, I think, is the fact that they have these test beds. And the test beds are where they get a bunch of their vendors together to build, in this case, an intelligent urban water supply, or a track and trace test bed, or a microgrid test bed. That's very hard to say. And you get a sense of what vendors you might work with, but more importantly, you see what you're going to need to build all this, because it isn't exactly intuitive to figure out how to put some of these things together, or even why you might want to do that. So I like these. They include things like, they include the security layers, they include analytics, they include, your edge computing and how to get your data in and cleaned. So these are very deep. And if you're trying to get a sense of how you want to do these projects, this is a really good resource. And that's probably all I'm going to say about that. Because really, we could probably spend an entire show talking about one test bed, because that's kind of how deep these go. But go check it out. You'll like it. Unless you're not at all interested in the industrial IoT. Then Kevin may be like, yeah, Stacey, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. No, I'm more of a consumer home guy.
We serve everyone here. All right. back to consumer. I don't know. This had industrial applications that never came to fruition. Mayo. Kevin, what happened to Mayo? My gesture-based controls thing. They had a great Star Wars toy. I thought they were going to be huge.
The Mayo armband you're talking about, you'd strap it on your forearm and you could use it for gestures to control things, and came from Thalmic Labs, which Amazon actually backed. Geez, they were founded in 2012 and raised about $135 million in funding, and the Mayo armband is a goner.
I tried the Mayo armband. I actually had a demo version, and I tried it, and it was weird because their problem was they had the interface. They did not have the other side of the market, so things using it. So the only thing I could do with it was actually, I think it was integrated with was it Microsoft Office or something? So I could move my PowerPoint slides with it. And it was pretty not exciting.
No.
There weren't actual commercial applications. So they had developers building all this cool stuff where you can control robots and you can control like operating rooms. But at the end of the day, no one actually built any of these things. So you had no reason to buy the armband.
That's sad.
It is. It felt like a little bit ahead of its time. Or maybe it wasn't the right, like I still strongly believe in gesture-based controls. I don't know if it's going to be a wearable that does it or if it's going to be like camera-based, so like the Kinect. But I do believe this is a thing that we're going to see someday. One day.
Someday.
All right. And in other really cool toys, Vector. Kevin.
Yes.
Tell me about your adorable little robot.
Yes, I think I mentioned him before. I kickstarted the Vector by Anki robot, which I don't know why they went to Kickstarter because they're an established device maker already, and Vector is available already in retail stores and online. So it's $250 for this tiny little robot, which is patterned after their previous robot, Cosmo. They look identical. Perhaps the colors are different. That's about the only way you can tell. On the inside, though, Cosmo pretty much didn't have a lot of his own smarts. He interfaced through a smartphone app. Vector has smarts, and by smarts I mean like a Qualcomm 200 level chip, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, probably the same sensors as Cosmo, like a gyroscope, an IR laser, capacitive touch on his head so you can pet him, same cute little display for his screen, speakers, and this also, though, has 4 beamforming microphones, which Cosmo did not, and that's because you can voice control Vector. So I paid $199, and I don't regret it for a second, even though I will say this is not something I think everybody should rush out and buy. It's not a home robot that's going to do things. It is a small little handheld robot that can move around independently and autonomously. He knows where his charger is. He's smart enough to go back to his charger by himself when his battery is low. You can ask him things like the weather or time or even some basic information. I like how they do this, though. The little animations on his screen show like the actual weather outside, and he gets sad when it's clouds and all that. So it's a cute little robot, just as cute as Cosmo was. My wife actually likes this, and she likes very few of my tech purchases. But it's the autonomous nature of him that appeals to me, the fact that he's cloud connected all the time, and that they're going to have an SDK available in beta in December, so I can use Python to make him do my own little things, make him speak certain things. Maybe trigger events will have him say, hey, the Dow is up 2% today, or something, whatever. I haven't decided yet. But
your Bitcoin.
My Bitcoin. Oh, I could easily leverage that code once I have their SDK. Absolutely. So he is cute, and he speaks back to you, and he has facial recognition and can take photos of you and whatnot. Again, not a ton of utility yet. However, I should add that just this week, Anki said, hey, we've asked all you Kickstarters what you want to see the first big feature integration is, and guess what it was?
Madame.
You got it. So that is what they're working on. There's no timeline yet, but it's in the works. And that'll be handy. I have so many smart speakers around the house, I don't need another one. But I would use this one because he's like a little companion where I can just say, hey, pal, what's next on my calendar,
Oh, my God. I would much rather talk to a cute robot and have it answer me when I'm like, hey, what's the weather outside? And then he shows his little rain clouds. Oh, my God. So cute.
Oh, and he speaks the weather, too. It's great. It gives you the temperature and everything.
Oh, so I think looking at this, 1, it's adorable. 2, do you think it'd be good for like kids and programming?
I would say yes, you just have to keep your expectations in check. And by that I mean the SDK is in beta in December. I'm actually going to get access to an early alpha of it next week. So it's probably going to be a little hit or miss in terms of making him do things through programming. But just as a little companion robot with a smidge of utility right now and a lot of potential, yeah, I think so. I mean, you had Cosmo for your daughter. And I think you told me she played with him for a little while, but then she got bored.
Yes.
And I get that, because how did she have to control him? It was all through a smartphone app, and
It was. And he only had at the time 4 or 5 games that we could play. And we had to get the tablet out and we had to wake Cosmo up and connect him to the tablet and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And see, you only use a smartphone or the smartphone app to connect him one time, and that's just to set up the Wi-Fi stuff. At that point, he's doing his thing. I mean, if he gets bored, he'll come off the charger and start beeping and booping, playing with his cube, or start nudging you to play with him. And I think a more interactive, autonomous type robot would be more appealing to somebody over the older Cosmo.
Yeah. Sad. I don't know if I really want to spend another $250 on a smart toy that my daughter doesn't play with. Oy. Okay. Well, it is that time, Kevin. It is time to turn to our voicemails, which we have gotten many of. But before we get into our voicemail, I wanted to clarify something that we said on an earlier show because there seems to be a little confusion about it. Kevin talked about putting a smart plug in front of a connected hub as a way to power cycle it on or off if need be. But he did not say that you should put that in front of your router to power cycle your router. Right, Kevin?
That's correct, because once you do that, you don't have internet access to turn the plug back on.
Which one of our listeners pointed out to us, and we were like, oh yes, but that's not what we were going after. So just to be clear for you guys, I'm sure if you tried it yourself in front of your router, you would quickly discover that this is not the ideal thing to do. But this is for in front of your hubs. Okay, let's get to this week's voicemail. And just a reminder, the IoT Podcast Hotline is brought to you by Schlage. They have a variety of stylish and secure electronic locks to choose from. And note that smarter homes start with Schlage. We also have a chance for you to win a Schlage lock and the Wi-Fi adapter. To do so, you just need to call us at 512-623-7424 and leave us a question. Yay! And when you do that, you will be entered to win. We will draw this one at the end of October. So midnight, October 31st is your last chance to enter to win this month's lock. And now, let's go to this week's question from Paul.
Hi, Stacy and Kevin. I'm looking for a smart lock that works natively on Wi-Fi. Well, the locks I've seen are either Bluetooth or some other IoT network that requires conversion to the internet, or I should say Wi-Fi.
Oh, Paul, this is a good question, and I have many thoughts. The reason that you don't find a lot of Wi-Fi locks out there is because Wi-Fi draws a lot of power, and people typically don't like changing the batteries on their locks that often. But there is a Wi-Fi lock out there. It is the Hampton Array lock. It just launched a couple weeks ago, and this has both Wi-Fi and solar power. So if this is outside on your front door, you could actually avoid changing your lock on this thing for 6 months or so. If it's inside, like on a garage or something like that, and doesn't get sunlight, it's probably only going to last a month. So kind of keep that in mind and know that you'll be changing batteries a lot. Another thing to keep in mind about this particular lock is it's $319, which is...
Youch.
Yeah, kind of expensive, but that's because you're paying for, well, Wi-Fi, the solar power, probably mostly those things. And it's a nice looking lock. I mean, it's not, the materials are nice. So you can only buy this right now from the Hampton website and the...
Ace Hardware?
Ace Hardware. Yes, Ace Hardware stores. So those are your options there. Although I would say, and here's my option for you, a lot of the connected locks out there have a Wi-Fi bridge. So you don't actually have to get like a crazy Wink or SmartThings smart home hub. You can just buy the bridge. So August offers this, Nest, the Nest by Yale or the Yale by Nest lock offers this, and so do the Schlage locks. And I think actually the Kwikset locks do as well. So almost all of them have the lock plus the Wi-Fi bridge that allows you that remote connectivity. And that about wraps it up for this week's show. Remember, if you have a question, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and you will also be entered to win a Schlage lock. Now, stay tuned for our guest. This week's guest is Iot Consortium, who is the CEO of Espresso, which makes the ESP32 chip that a lot of people are using in their projects. And you're going to want to hear his thoughts on China, keeping IoT devices secure and working for 20 years in the future, and more. Hey everyone, we are taking a break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Cognizant, and we are welcoming back Frank Antosamy, who is Cognizant's global markets leader for IoT services. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Stacey. Great to be back.
Frank, last week you gave us a cool example of how Cognizant helps customers. It was a global grocery chain using an IoT solution to keep food safe and save energy. What's up for today?
Yes. Last week, keeping food fresh and data even fresher. Today, moving water.
Food and water, both things we definitely need. So what's the story?
We're seeing a lot of activity with industrial giants navigating the shift to adopt IoT to redefine traditional manufacturing models in response to their business demands. One of our European clients makes complex industrial water pumps. They move water, drinking water to cities and villages, wastewater for industrial applications like deep sea drilling or for heating and cooling. When you move water, and forgive the pun, you also have access to a flood of information, water pressure and volume, which can tell you how the pump is working, about its load and performance, and what's in the water. Our client is using sensors built into its new generation pumps to provide information not only on their product's performance, but also on the chemical composition of the water they're moving.
How is that useful?
It's useful for both the manufacturer and their customers. For the manufacturer themselves, they understand the consumption patterns, the water pressure, what changes they need to make to the product design itself. And for their customers, you take, for example, some of the customers they have like municipalities. For a municipality, it's super important that they understand the chemical composition of what's in water. So if there are certain chemical spikes in water supply, it's a safety issue. They have to investigate and they have to even shut down systems in cases. Now, if you take that in the context of industrial applications and what it means to industrial applications, in an industrial setting, if the pressure or volume that is going through their systems go beyond a specific threshold, that could blow up some systems internally. And early warning systems from the applications that we've developed using sensors help prevent our customers having these damages. So it's immensely valuable both for our customer who makes these industrial pumps and for their customers who are consuming the water delivered through these pumps.
Well, that sounds like a win-win for everyone.
A win-win from adopting a digital, data-based IoT solution. IoT is the avenue to better monitoring safety and reliability, improving products, and increasing revenues with new business models.
That was a great example of Cognizant working with industrial IoT. Where can we go to find out more?
You can find out a lot more about this use case and many more at our website, cognizant.com/IoT.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Iot Consortium, who is the CEO and founder of Espresso. Hi, Consortium. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Hi, Stacey. Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, for those of you who don't know, Espresso makes some very popular chips that makers, big companies, all kinds of folks use. They've sold over 100 million IoT chips. And Consortium is here to talk to us about basically the company and what he thinks is ahead for the Internet of Things. So Consortium, let's get started with, why did you start Espresso?
We started Espresso in 2008 because we were thinking that there would be a market for connected devices in things like power plugs or light switches and light bulbs. This was the basic idea at that point of time, to put Wi-Fi into all these devices.
And this was like back then, we in the US were not really thinking too much about IoT, but in China, this was a thing that was happening?
Yes, I do distinctly remember talking to, a number of people about this. And there were many people who think that this is the way to go. But I think we happen to be the only company who worked on this.
Okay. And it took you 5 years to get your first chip out, which was the ESP8066. That was like revolutionary. I think you could buy it for a really low price. It actually worked. People were very excited. And then you guys launched the ESP32, which had both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth on it. Now you guys are working on a new chip, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
The new chip does not look that different from what we have done, except that it enables more artificial intelligence computation within the chip to make this more efficient. We already do some AI-related stuff on ESP32, like face recognition, voice recognition, or voice. So we are already doing some of these, but it's power hungry on ESP32, and we are going to build this in a better architecture in the new chip.
And earlier on, you talked to me about your feelings about how the IoT is going to develop and how AI will become part of everyday life. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think the fun part of being in the technology business is that we get to have an idea or have our own idea of what the world could be like. And then we start building towards that. So we are at the cusp of a revolution in the way consumer electronics will be built. And it's enabled by a couple of things. First of all, the progress in technology allows us to have a lot more computation power within the chip, and the development of IoT, the cloud. So we store a lot of data about ourselves on the cloud. And then there's the development of artificial intelligence, which gives us powerful technology to analyze data that we receive from sensors connected to the chip. So this allows, any device that is being deployed in a setting, which we call context, to be aware of its surrounding. For instance, if you have a coffee machine, the coffee machine might understand, that Stacy might like to drink a certain kind of coffee. And the coffee machine might also have a camera that sees you coming and looks up its database and say, hey, Stacy, you haven't had your coffee today. Would you want to have a coffee today? And so it makes you a coffee, right? So this is, I think, what we think is exciting when we build devices that interact with you like the way humans do.
So I don't disagree with you. It's a fun vision, although there's some aspects I'll quibble with in a minute. But what do you think that framework is to allow these devices to talk to each other? Because right now we're kind of in this world where there are no real frameworks. There's a couple companies trying, and then there's things that are becoming de facto standards like Alexa or Google.
I think one of the crucial piece of technology that must be used to enable this is reinforcement learning, is to learn how things should behave. I think it's almost impossible for us to, program all the scripts in the world to fit everyone's use. The coffee machine should learn what it should do when it gets to a house. It takes a while, but once, like I say, once it learns how to do this, it will be a personalized thing to you.
So for reinforcement learning, I'm just imagining my coffee machine might come with a basic model of what to reinforce, right? But
yes,
I'm going to end up having to train it. And if I imagine selling, let's say, 10 million coffee machines, that's 10 million trainings that are going to have to happen. Are those going to happen in the cloud or on the device for that kind of level of personalization?
Well, that training happens in the cloud, maybe in the device. It depends on the, model of it.
Because that's a lot. The training for reinforcement learning on a personalized level for X number of coffee machines, that's a lot of compute resources. That is not insignificant.
Yes. But if you were to divide the behavior of humans into groups where they are similar, it may not be that bad.
Okay.
There will be big data and there will be, sort of models to predict. Rather than calling it training, how about calling it predicting what model fits you?
Okay. That makes sense. So daily coffee drinker, or maybe coffee drinker only when final exams are coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Knowing that this is Sunday or this is Saturday, all that sorts of context.
All right. That's fun. So then how would a person, because then I start thinking about how you use this, because when I envision this, I'm if it's good, AI is pretty seamless, right? Your coffee's hey, do you want your coffee? And you're yes. But if it's bad, you're no, I don't want coffee. Quit asking me. And then you multiply that by your fridge asking you if you want, your yogurt for the day, and your washing machine asking you, hey, you usually do laundry today, but you're no, I'm going out of town. So how this world of things, both asking us for stuff and maybe even automatically deciding things, How does that, how do we develop user interfaces for that don't irritate us?
Well, I think that eventually this is where it gets exciting, right? Because human beings should not be interacting with things to do mundane stuff, like washing your clothes or packing stuff. I think this is where AI comes in, and it should help us to do all these things, because it may help to reduce the amount of consumer products that we purchase and waste.
Tell me more about that.
Well, let's take mineral water bottle, right?
Okay.
We buy water in bottles. And why do we buy that? Because it's convenient. Perhaps if there's a way to make things convenient without having to buy that bottle of water, we will make all these bottled waters go away. We'll reduce the consumption of plastic in the world.
So that might look like a water bottle that communicates with me when I need to drink more, or what would that look like?
We don't really know, but we think that there is a way to automate all this stuff, because drinking water is something that we always do. But some of us buy bottles of water because we don't want to wash these cups. Maybe buying a sort of a robot, to take care of all these things.
Ah, okay. So then I have to ask, what is your vision for robots? Do you think it's just smarter appliances? Like your coffee machine is kind of a robot, right? But if I've got a robot that brings me a bottle of water, that's a very different type of robot. So how do you view robots?
We think that even for robots, there are different sizes, and they will have to communicate with one another and work together in order to get these things done. And we are the ones who are building the edge and the end devices where the sensors are, where the sensors sit in, where we help establish the context of where these devices are in. So this is how we look at it. We are like the nervous system.
Let's go. This is a fun future. It's a good future for you because, you've got lots of chips and everything. And let's talk about what that means, though, for products. Like my coffee machine, I have a kind of crazy, super automated coffee machine. So it'll probably last 5 to 7 years. And if I think about that being connected, will it have a shorter lifetime? Because most chip makers do not, and most companies that build things probably don't want to support it for that long.
You mean on the cloud or?
Both on the cloud. Yeah, cloud or security updates, those kind of things.
It shouldn't be that bad. It should not be.
I agree with you. It should not be. But today there's some 3 years feels like, yeah, I could have a device and expect, full support both on the chip level, the OS level, and the device level for about 3 years seems reasonable. That's kind of a smartphone lifetime.
I see. We are actually thinking as we build these devices, there would be a way that technology enables us to reduce consumption of raw material so that perhaps the human race could last for another 100,000 years. Could we? I mean, it's an idealistic thing to think about, but when we think about building devices, we want to think about how we can reduce the consumption of plastic or raw material and build devices that are malleable, programmable, and will last for a very long time.
How are you guys doing that? I mean, at the chip level?
Well, first of all, we build our devices to last for 20 years. This is one of the, feature of the way we design, the chips. Mm-hmm. We open source our codes so that it will live in a public domain for a long time and it will have support.
For the full 20 years?
I don't know.
Okay.
But this is the best effort, sort of thing, short of open sourcing the whole chip.
Right. So what are your big concerns about the whole market for the Internet of Things that, feel like, oh, this could really screw us over as we're trying to put chips in everything?
Well, I think everyone is concerned about security. That's one major thing. And I think there have been some incidents recently. We don't know whether it's true or not, but it certainly looks, but still security is a huge thing. And the fragmentation of the standards, the fragmentation of the market, is also another. Well, we don't know how it will be like in the future, but it's going to be very diverse. That's what we see, which may not be a bad thing.
It may not. As long as things can talk to each other, and that's still kind of up in the air.
Yes and no. The way we look at it is we are trying to keep within the Wi-Fi framework, because when we do Bluetooth, right, we see that there would be coexistence problem between Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So what we think about, having more standards is that it will make it less efficient. But we think Wi-Fi is the most promising candidate because it has got a large bandwidth and it's free. The infrastructure is there. So if you want to do AI, Wi-Fi is the most natural choice to couple it with.
But it's such a power hog. I mean, most people are trying to avoid Wi-Fi. The companies that are avoiding Wi-Fi are putting, Bluetooth in things like locks and sensors that require batteries, right? That can't be plugged in. Do you think Wi-Fi will get more power efficient or better batteries for things?
Okay. We think that Wi-Fi will get more power efficient. There is nothing in Wi-Fi that stops us from building, very efficient low power chips.
Okay. How would we go about doing this? Help me out.
For Espressive, we have this thing called ESP Now, and it is almost like a 2.4 gigahertz thing that allows you to connect to another device, a Wi-Fi device, instantaneously when it wakes up. So you don't have to maintain a connection to that device when you are, not in the active state. Yeah, you can power down the whole transceiver and achieve very low power consumption.
How low is very low power consumption? Let's do it in terms of like if I have a Wi-Fi sensor that's waking up to talk to something maybe once a day, what would be the battery life on that? I know there's a lot of variables there, but.
We are talking about 5 microamps for ESP32.
Oh, okay. Microamps. So if I'm going to translate that into watts, that would be.
I think for 100 milliamps hour, I think that translates to about 15 years or 20 years. I can't remember.
Okay. Thank you. I am not an engineer, so I'm like, oh no, conversions. Okay. There is so much activity happening in IoT in China. Can you just give me a sense of what is happening? What is most exciting there? Where China is just surpassing everybody else in terms of what it is doing?
Well, I have no idea because frankly speaking, I don't think that there is any difference in what China is doing or the rest of the world is doing. Everyone is building IoT devices. We have got 4,000 or 5,000 customers and they come from all around the world. And what we see is that everyone is basically right now building connectivity into their products. So we don't see that difference yet.
Okay. Well, that sort of makes me feel better. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.